Welcome to the world of science fiction, where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. Jake Morrison's first indication that his life had taken a hard left turn into uncharted space came in the form of pulsing turquoise symbols spray-painted across his apartment door in what appeared to be living light. He stood in the corridor of Nexus Station's residential level 47, clutching his morning synth coffee and staring at the bioluminescent patterns that definitely hadn't been there when he'd stumbled home from his graveyard shift 12 hours ago. The geometric designs pulsed in complex rhythms that seemed to communicate meaning just beyond his comprehension. "What the actual hell?" he muttered, fishing his access card from his engineer's jumpsuit. "Magnificent work, isn't it?" Jake spun around, nearly dropping his coffee. Leaning against the opposite wall with the casual confidence of someone who owned the entire station was a woman who redefined his understanding of the word stunning. Her skin held the deep emerald of old earth forests, smooth and luminous as if lit from within. Her eyes blazed electric blue, not metaphorically but with actual bioluminescence that cast faint patterns on her cheekbones. She wore a form-fitting bodysuit that left little to the imagination while somehow maintaining an air of elegant sophistication. When she smiled, her teeth showed the slightest hint of predatory sharpness. "You did this," Jake said, gesturing at his door with his coffee mug. "Guilty as charged." She pushed off from the wall with fluid grace that made Jake think of hunting cats. "I'm Zara Vexistar, your new neighbor in 4702. That unit's been empty for 8 months. Not anymore." Zara's smile widened, revealing more of those intriguingly sharp teeth. "I moved in yesterday evening. Hope you don't mind the exterior decoration. It's biologically necessary." Jake stared at the living light patterns again. Up close, he could see they were actually three-dimensional, extending slightly from the door's surface like crystallized energy. "Biologically necessary?" "Mating season," Zara said with the same casual tone someone might use to discuss weather patterns. "My species marks prime territory when we enter reproductive cycles. Your door scored highest in the habitability assessment." The coffee mug slipped from Jake's suddenly nerveless fingers. It shattered against the metal decking, sending ceramic fragments skittering across the corridor in tiny accusatory clicks. "My door scored highest in what assessment?" Zara stepped closer, and Jake caught her scent, something like ozone mixed with honey and an underlying musk that made his brain temporarily forget how to process language. "Well, technically what's behind the door. Though I must say, the structural integrity is quite impressive. Excellent feng shui." "Doors don't have feng shui." "Everything has energy resonance patterns," she corrected with academic precision. "Yours are particularly harmonious." Jake knelt to collect the larger ceramic pieces, partly to clean up and partly to give his brain time to catch up with this conversation. When he straightened, Zara was examining the bioluminescent symbols with the critical eye of an artist reviewing her work. "These should maintain optimal luminosity for approximately 10 standard cycles," she said, running one finger along a particularly bright spiral. "Fair warning to competing females that this territory is claimed and defended." "Claimed by who?" "Me, obviously." She gave him a look that suggested he was being deliberately obtuse. "For you, obviously. I never agreed to be claimed. Your consent isn't required for the initial territorial assessment." Zara waved a dismissive hand. "Standard xenobiological protocol. I've evaluated available genetic material in this residential sector and determined you represent optimal breeding compatibility." Jake nearly dropped the ceramic shards he'd just collected. "Optimal breeding? What now?" "Superior immune system markers, ideal height-to-weight distribution ratios, adequate cranial capacity measurements." She ticked off points on her fingers like reading a grocery list. Plus, your pheromone signature indicates peak fertility despite your relatively advanced age. My relatively, how old do you think I am? 28 Earth Standard Years, approximately 6 months. She tilted her head, studying his face with scientific interest. Am I incorrect? 29 last month. The accuracy was somehow more unsettling than if she'd been wildly wrong. How could you possibly? Comprehensive biochemical analysis, bone density evaluation through microresonance scanning, cellular degradation assessment via visual spectrum analysis. Zara's gaze traveled slowly down his body and back up, clinical, yet predatory. I'm extremely thorough in mate selection procedures. Jake backed toward his apartment door, fumbling for his access card. Listen, Zara, I'm flattered, really, deeply flattered, but I'm not currently in the market for a breeding partner. Market economics are irrelevant to biological imperatives, she replied, following him while maintaining precise distance. Besides, I'm not seeking permanent pair bonding, just optimal genetic material for reproductive purposes, very casual, very modern. Casual reproduction. Jake's card reader beeped acceptance and he nearly fell through his doorway in relief. That's not how human sexuality works. Then explain human sexual mechanics to me. The genuine curiosity in her voice made him pause despite every survival instinct screaming at him to flee. We usually start with social interaction, shared meals, conversation, emotional connection development. How wastefully inefficient. Zara frowned with the expression of someone encountering a particularly stupid piece of technology. What if genetic incompatibility is discovered after investing that much temporal energy? That's not how we evaluate romantic potential. Then how do you evaluate it? Jake found himself at a complete loss. How did you explain human courtship to someone who approached it like a military procurement operation? Attraction, he said finally, shared interests, emotional resonance, intellectual compatibility. I'm attracted to your genetic markers, Zara countered smoothly. We both inhabit this station, shared environment. I feel very resonant with your DNA structure, and intellectually, you're clearly intelligent enough to survive to reproductive age despite being human. That's not, Jake started, then stopped. What do you mean, despite being human? Your species has remarkably low survival optimization for sapient beings. No natural armor, limited sensory capabilities, vulnerable circulatory systems positioned near surface tissue. Zara looked genuinely puzzled. It's statistically miraculous any of you live long enough to reproduce. Thanks for the confidence boost. Yet here you are, she continued, stepping closer to his doorway. Thriving in artificial environment, maintaining complex technical employment, exhibiting excellent health markers, clearly superior human specimen. Jake leaned against his doorframe, studying her face. Despite the otherworldly beauty and predatory confidence, something almost vulnerable flickered in her expression, like she genuinely wanted to understand but was working from a completely incompatible operating manual. What happens if you don't find a breeding partner during your cycle? He asked. Biochemical system cascade, hormonal toxicity, potential organ failure. She said it matter-of-factly, but her hands clenched briefly at her sides. My species doesn't handle reproductive frustration well. Organ failure? We evolved under intense selective pressure. Reproductive success equals survival. Failing to mate during optimal windows triggers systematic biological shutdown. Zara's confident smile flickered. But don't worry. I'm certain I can locate alternative genetic material if you're unavailable. She turned to leave, and Jake felt an unexpected stab of something that might have been guilt. Whatever her approach lacked in subtlety, she was clearly dealing with pressures beyond her control. Wait, he called out. Zara paused, looking back over her shoulder with carefully controlled hope. Maybe we could try the human approach, Jake heard himself saying. Dating, getting to know each other, see what develops. In how much time? How long is your cycle? Peak fertility occurs in 7 standard cycles. Zara's eyes lit up with something between relief and calculation. You would engage in inefficient human courtship rituals within that time frame? We could see how it goes. Her smile transformed into something radiant and genuine. Really? You'd participate in wasteful social bonding procedures for my benefit? When you put it like that, you make it sound incredibly romantic. Zara laughed, a sound like silver bells mixed with purring. I have no cultural context for romance, but I'm willing to learn optimal human mating displays. Great. Dinner tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. I'll cook something. You'll personally prepare nutritional sustenance. She looked genuinely intrigued. Is this part of dominance establishment? It's part of getting to know each other. Fascinating. Zara produced a small crystalline device and made notations that appeared as floating symbols in the air. Should I bring genetic compatibility charts for reference? Definitely not. Biochemical analysis data? No. What should I bring? Jake smiled despite everything. Just yourself. And maybe dial down the territorial marking intensity. My neighbors will file noise complaints. Zara glanced at the pulsing symbols on his door. I could reduce luminosity output, but I cannot completely remove the markers. Competing females must understand this territory is claimed and defended. What competing females? Kira, from level 52, has been conducting reconnaissance sweeps of this residential sector for 3 weeks. Very aggressive courtship displays. Zara's eyes flashed with something that looked distinctly possessive. And there's a Nexeral female in Building D, whose territorial expansion has been highly inappropriate. You're telling me I'm some kind of hot commodity on this station? Prime genetic material in limited population pool? Absolutely. Zara stepped closer again, her voice dropping to a husky whisper. But I identified you first. Jake's heart rate spiked, and he had the distinct impression she could sense his physiological response. Identified me how exactly? The door marking was just the public announcement. Her smile turned predatory again. The real claiming comes later. Later when? After dinner. After we've established this emotional connection humans apparently require. She traced one finger along his doorframe, leaving a faint trail of bioluminescence. Don't worry, I'm told the claiming process is quite pleasurable for human males. Jake swallowed hard. Good to know. 7 o'clock tomorrow, then. Zara moved toward her apartment, pausing at her own door. Oh, and Jake. Yeah? You might want to research Xerathi reproductive customs before our date, just for optimal preparation. She disappeared into her unit, leaving Jake standing in his doorway with his pulse racing and his worldview fundamentally altered. He looked at the pulsing territorial markers on his door, then at the ceramic fragments still scattered across the corridor. What the hell have I gotten myself into? He muttered. His personal comm chimed with an incoming message. The sender was listed as Z Vextar, Unit 4702. The message was simple. Wear something with easy access points, for efficiency. Jake stared at the message for a long moment, then looked back at his door. The bioluminescent marks pulsed steadily, like a countdown timer he couldn't read. 7 days until her cycle peaked. 1 dinner to figure out if he was about to make the best or worst decision of his life. He stepped into his apartment and sealed the door, already wondering what exactly one cooked for an alien who evaluated potential mates based on genetic optimization and reproductive efficiency. Outside in the corridor, Zara's soft laughter echoed through the walls, followed by what sounded distinctly like satisfied purring. Jake had the sinking feeling he was about to discover just how deep the rabbit hole of interspecies relationships could go, and the terrifying realization that part of him was actually looking forward to finding out. Jake's research into Zerathi reproductive customs lasted exactly 53 minutes before he had to close his tablet and take a cold sonic shower. The academic articles were clinical in their language, but the implications were anything but sterile. Zerathi females didn't just mark territory. They conducted comprehensive biochemical analysis of potential mates, could literally smell genetic compatibility, and possessed the ability to induce heightened arousal states through controlled pheromone release. Controlled pheromone release, he muttered, staring at his reflection in the refresher mirror. She's been dosing me with alien aphrodisiacs. His comm buzzed with another message from Zara. Dietary restrictions, allergic reactions, blood chemistry type. Jake stared at the message. Blood chemistry seemed oddly specific for dinner planning. He typed back, "No allergies. O negative. Y blood type." The response came immediately. "Excellent for our biochemical compatibility matrix. Very promising results. That's not why I told you. But it's valuable data nonetheless. 7 o'clock approaches. I'm experiencing elevated anticipation responses. That makes 2 of us. 3 of us, actually." Jake frowned at his comm screen. 3? Kira has been monitoring our communication exchanges. Standard territorial surveillance. Before Jake could ask what that meant, someone hammered on his apartment door with enough force to rattle the reinforced frame. A voice echoed through the corridor, female, furious, and definitely not human. "Zara Vextar, I detect you're marking pheromones. Release the human or accept territorial challenge." Jake activated his door's external camera. Standing in the corridor was a tall woman with silver skin that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. Her crimson eyes blazed with what could only be described as predatory hunger, and her muscular frame suggested she could probably bench press a shuttle. "That would be Kira," Zara's voice came from behind him. Jake spun around to find her standing in his kitchen, apparently having entered through some method that bypassed his door entirely. She wore a different outfit today, something that looked like it had been woven from captured starlight, form-fitting and somehow modest despite revealing significant amounts of green skin. "How did you get in here?" he demanded. "Emergency maintenance access. I needed to prepare dinner arrangements." She gestured toward his kitchen counter, which now displayed an array of containers that definitely hadn't come from station vendors. Also, Kira's arrival timeline moved up significantly. Territorial disputes require immediate response. The hammering intensified, accompanied by what sounded like claws scraping against metal. "Should I be worried?" Jake asked. "That depends on your definition of worried." Zara moved to his door controls. "Kira is Vexarian, warrior species from the same star system as Zerathi. We have complicated history." "What kind of complicated?" "Evolutionary competition, resource conflicts, occasional mating wars." Zara's tone suggested this was perfectly normal diplomatic background. But she's also extremely honorable and follows strict combat protocols. Combat protocols? Before Zara could answer, the door exploded inward. Jake threw himself behind his couch as fragments of reinforced polymer scattered across his living room. Through the smoke and debris, Kira stalked into his apartment, taller than he'd expected, built like a professional athlete, with silver skin that rippled like liquid mercury and eyes that burned like small stars. "Zara!" Kira growled, her voice carrying an accent that turned every syllable into a controlled threat. "You marked him without honorable challenge." "I marked him through proper courtship procedures," Zara replied calmly, not moving from her position near the kitchen. "Perhaps if you understood the concept, You'd have better success attracting mates. Kira's claws extended from her fingertips with audible snicks. Human male, present yourself for evaluation. Jake reluctantly emerged from behind his furniture, acutely aware that his apartment now looked like a war zone. Hi, Jake Morrison. I'd shake hands, but Kira's burning gaze locked onto him, and he felt like a specimen under a very intense microscope. Her nostrils flared as she scanned him from head to toe. Recent marking, less than 1 rotation cycle. Her attention snapped back to Zara. You haven't completed bonding protocols yet. The human prefers gradual courtship development, Zara said, moving slightly closer to Jake. We're respecting his cultural requirements. Inefficient. Kira began circling them both, her movements fluid and predatory. I challenge your territorial claim. Combat for mating rights. Whoa, hold on, Jake interjected, raising both hands. Don't I get any input on this? Both women turned to stare at him as if he'd suggested something fundamentally absurd. Males don't participate in territorial combat, Kira explained with barely concealed impatience. You're the resource, not a combatant. That's incredibly sexist. It's biology, Zara corrected. Zarathi and Vexarian females are naturally dominant during reproductive cycles. Males are protected assets. Protected assets? Jake's voice climbed several octaves. I'm not an asset. You are now, Kira said with obvious satisfaction. High-quality genetic material with compatible biochemistry and adequate survival instincts. Extremely rare on this station. Jake looked around his destroyed apartment, his overturned furniture, his scattered belongings, his door that no longer existed, and felt something snap inside him. Enough, he said firmly, channeling every leadership training module he'd ever endured. Both of you, sit down. Now. Neither woman moved. I said sit, Jake repeated, putting all his authority into the command. If you want to fight over me, you're going to follow some basic ground rules first. Kira tilted her head, apparently intrigued by his sudden assertiveness. You would negotiate your own territorial status? I would prefer not to be treated like a piece of premium equipment. Jake gestured toward his ruined couch. Zara, sit. Kira, there's a chair by the window that survived your dramatic entrance. To his surprise, both women complied, though they maintained predatory eye contact across the room. Good, Jake said, pacing between them. Now let's establish some facts. Zara, you need a mate within 7 days or you face biological consequences. Correct? Correct. Kira, I assume you're in a similar situation. My cycle peaks in 9 days, Kira confirmed, but I've been tracking optimal genetic material on this station for weeks. You represent the best available option. Flattering and terrifying in equal measure. Jake continued pacing. Here's what's going to happen. No combat, no territorial disputes. If you both want to compete for my attention, you're going to do it like civilized beings. Zara's eyebrows rose. Civilized how? Normal social interaction, conversation, shared activities, standard relationship development protocols. Kira looked genuinely confused. What purpose would conversation serve? It would help me decide who I'm actually compatible with as a person, not just as genetic material. Compatibility is determined through biochemical analysis and physical trials, Kira insisted. Conversation is irrelevant data. Conversation is how humans form emotional bonds, Jake explained. And emotional bonds are what make human relationships functional. Your species bonds through verbal communication. Kira sounded skeptical. Among other methods, yes. The two women exchanged glances, the first non-hostile interaction Jake had witnessed between them. This is highly irregular, Zara said finally. So is having my apartment destroyed by alien territorial disputes, Jake retorted. We're all adapting here. A soft chime from the station's communication system interrupted their standoff. The wall display activated, showing the concerned face of Nexus Station's chief of security, a professional-looking human woman with cybernetic enhancements around her left eye. "This is Security Chief Martinez to residents of Level 47. We're responding to reports of structural damage and disturbance complaints. Is everyone all right?" Jake glanced at his destroyed door, then at Kira, who was examining her claws with studied innocence. "We're fine, Chief Martinez," he called out. "Just a cultural misunderstanding about visiting protocols. Mr. Morrison, we show significant structural damage to your unit. Do you require assistance?" "No assistance needed, just some property damage that's being handled through appropriate compensation channels." Kira stepped forward, her impressive height making her visible in the camera's range. "I will provide full restitution for damages caused by my improper entry methods." "Ma'am, did you just destroy a reinforced security door with your bare hands?" "Just claws," Kira replied helpfully, extending them for demonstration. Chief Martinez paused, clearly recalibrating her assessment of the situation. "Right. Well, Mr. Morrison, do you wish to file any charges for property destruction?" Jake looked at Kira, who was watching him with an expression that might have been hopeful despite her warrior's facade. Despite everything, he found himself reluctant to create more problems for her. "No charges," he decided, "but I will need documented compensation for repair costs." "Acceptable," Kira agreed immediately. "I will handle all restoration expenses." "We'll file this as accidental damage with voluntary restitution," Chief Martinez said, "but in the future, please use standard door activation protocols like everyone else." "Understood," Kira said solemnly. After the security channel closed, Jake surveyed his apartment again. Without the adrenaline of confrontation, the full scope of destruction became clear. Furniture overturned, personal items scattered, and a gaping hole where his entrance used to be. "This is going to be expensive," he muttered. "I apologize for the property destruction," Kira said, and she actually sounded sincere. "My species tends toward direct action when territorial instincts are triggered." "What species are you exactly?" Jake asked. "You look different from Zara." "Vexarian," Kira replied. "Same star system as Zarathi, but we evolved under more aggressive environmental pressures, higher gravity, predatory competition, resource scarcity. Hence the claws and the property destruction. Hence the superior combat capabilities and survival optimization," Kira corrected with obvious pride. Zara snorted. "Superior at destroying things, maybe." "At least I don't require chemical manipulation to attract mates," Kira shot back. "My pheromones are completely natural." "Ladies," Jake interrupted before the argument could escalate further. "Remember the civilized approach we just discussed?" Both women fell silent, though they continued glaring at each other with obvious hostility. Jake's comm chimed with a message from station maintenance about emergency door replacement procedures. He sighed as he read the estimated timeline. 48 hours for a new security door," he announced. "Until then, I'm living in an apartment with no entrance security." "I could provide perimeter defense," Kira offered. "Vexarian warriors are extensively trained in territorial protection." "Absolutely not," Zara said immediately. "I claimed him first. Protection is my responsibility." "Your protection led to this territorial dispute," Kira pointed out. "Your territorial dispute led to property destruction," Zara countered. Jake felt a headache building behind his eyes. "Neither of you is standing guard outside my apartment. I'll figure out temporary security arrangements." "You could stay with me," Zara suggested. "My quarters have advanced security systems and we could continue courtship development without interruption." "Or with me," Kira added quickly. "My unit has military-grade defensive protocols." "I'm not moving in with either of you," Jake said firmly. We literally just met. Courtship efficiency requires proximity, Kira argued. Human courtship efficiency requires trust development, Jake shot back, which takes time to establish. How much time? Zara asked, and Jake caught the underlying worry in her voice. Her biological deadline was still counting down. I don't know, he admitted honestly. It depends on compatibility assessment. Then we should maximize interaction opportunities, Kira said pragmatically. Scheduled meals, recreational activities, structured conversation sessions. You want to schedule getting to know you time? Jake couldn't help being amused by her methodical approach. Efficiency, Kira replied without embarrassment. Zara rolled her eyes. Typical Vexarian. You approach courtship like a military campaign. At least I approach it directly instead of relying on biochemical warfare. It's not warfare, it's natural attraction enhancement. Stop, Jake said wearily. Both of you. This constant conflict isn't helping anyone. She started it, both women said simultaneously, then glared at each other for the synchronization. Jake looked between them. Zara with her elegant beauty and complex biochemistry, Kira with her warrior's build and direct problem-solving approach. Both were intelligent, both were dealing with biological pressures beyond their control, and both seemed genuinely interested in him as more than just genetic material. Okay, he said finally, here's what we're going to do. Since I can't secure my apartment and you both want time with me, we're going to try a trial period. Trial period? Zara looked intrigued. Alternating custody, Jake clarified. Zara gets tomorrow, Kira gets the day after. We do normal activities, meals, conversations, recreational interaction. At the end of the trial period, I make a decision. How long is this trial period? Kira asked. Jake did quick mental calculations. 4 days, 2 each. That gives Zara time before her cycle peaks, and gives me enough information to make an informed choice. Both women considered this proposal with obvious calculation. And if you don't choose either of us, Zara asked quietly, then you handle your biological situations however you need to, Jake said honestly. But at least you'll know it was based on genuine incompatibility, not arbitrary selection. Acceptable, Kira said after a moment. Agreed, Zara added, though she looked less certain. Good. Jake surveyed his destroyed apartment again. I guess I'll be staying in emergency housing tonight. The station provides temporary accommodations for residents with uninhabitable units. I could escort you, Kira offered, for security purposes. I could accompany you, Zara added quickly, for moral support. I can manage by myself, Jake said firmly, but thank you both. He gathered essential items from his bedroom, grateful that Kira's dramatic entrance had been limited to the main living area. When he returned, both women were still there, watching each other with wary assessment. So, he said, shouldering his overnight bag. Zara, I'll meet you tomorrow at noon for our first official date. Date, Zara repeated, testing the word. Yes, I find this arrangement acceptable. Kira, the day after, at the same time. Understood. Kira's expression had shifted to something that might have been anticipation. Should I research human recreational preferences? Just be yourself, Jake advised. That's the entire point. He headed toward the gaping doorway, then paused. And ladies, no territorial disputes while I'm gone. I don't want to return and find you've destroyed the entire corridor. No combat, Zara promised. No property damage, Kira agreed. Jake looked between them one more time. Two beautiful, powerful alien women competing for his attention while dealing with biological imperatives that could literally kill them. His quiet life as a systems engineer felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. This is completely insane, he muttered. Most worthwhile endeavors are, Zara replied with a smile that made his pulse quicken despite everything. Sometimes insanity is just efficiency in disguise, Kira added with her own predatory grin. Jake shook his head and walked away, leaving them staring at each other across his ruined living room. Behind him, he heard the sound of carefully controlled conversation, two apex predators negotiating territorial boundaries with the delicacy of interstellar diplomats. His comm buzzed with messages from station maintenance, security follow-ups, and repair cost estimates that made his eyes water. But underneath the administrative chaos, he felt something unexpected, genuine anticipation. In 4 days, he would have to choose between two extraordinary women who represented completely different approaches to relationships, survival, and life itself. The practical part of his mind insisted this was the most complicated situation he'd ever encountered. The rest of him couldn't wait to see what happened next. As he reached the emergency housing office, Jake's comm chimed with one final message. The sender was Z Vextar, Unit 4702. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. Rest well, Jake Morrison. Tomorrow, we begin properly. A second message followed immediately from HFY, Unit 5203. I will not disappoint you. Prepare for optimal courtship efficiency. Jake stared at both messages, then at his hands, which still showed faint traces of bioluminescence from Zara's territorial marking. In 4 days, his life would either return to normal or transform into something he couldn't even imagine. The emergency housing clerk looked up as he approached. Accommodation assistance? Emergency housing, Jake confirmed. Alien territorial dispute destroyed my front door. The clerk, a middle-aged human woman with the expression of someone who'd seen everything, didn't even blink. Mating season? How did you know? Fourth one this week, she said with practiced sympathy. Don't worry, they usually work out fine. The ones that survive to make choices generally make good ones. The ones that survive? Figure of speech, the clerk assured him, though her expression suggested otherwise. Room 15B. Quiet, secure, reinforced walls in case anyone else decides to make dramatic entrances. Jake took the access card, wondering what exactly he'd gotten himself into and whether he'd live long enough to find out if it was worth it. Outside the housing office, he could hear distant sounds that might have been construction work or might have been two alien women rearranging his apartment according to their respective territorial instincts. 4 days to make a choice that would determine not just his romantic future, but potentially the survival of at least one sentient being. No pressure at all. Jake woke to the sound of his comm unit playing what could only be described as alien death metal at maximum volume. He bolted upright in the narrow emergency housing bunk, momentarily disoriented by unfamiliar surroundings. The music, if it could be called that, consisted of grinding harmonics punctuated by what sounded like industrial machinery having an argument with itself. "What the hell?" he muttered, grabbing his comm. The display showed 17 missed calls from Zara, 12 from Kira, and one from Station Security Chief Martinez that was marked Urgent, Respond Immediately. He answered Martinez's call first. "Morrison, where are you?" The security chief's voice carried the strained patience of someone dealing with multiple crises simultaneously. "Emergency housing, level 15. Why?" "Because your alien neighbors have turned level 47 into what my reports describe as a bioluminescent war zone with structural modifications that may violate physics." Jake closed his eyes. "How bad?" "They've somehow merged your apartment with both of theirs, created what appears to be a living wall system that responds to emotional states, and installed defensive capabilities that made my security team retreat. Twice." "Defensive capabilities?" "Energy weapons, Mr. Morrison. Your kitchen now has energy weapons." Jake was already pulling on his clothes. "I'll be right there." "Hurry." We've got diplomatic corps asking questions, and I really don't want to explain to them why Level 47 looks like the set of a science fiction war movie. The call ended, leaving Jake to contemplate how his simple dinner date had escalated into a diplomatic incident. He grabbed his overnight bag and headed for the lifts, dreading what he'd find. The approach to Level 47 provided his first clue that things had gotten wildly out of hand. The normally sterile station corridor now pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that flowed along the walls like living circuitry. The air itself seemed charged with energy that made his skin tingle. Where his apartment door used to be, there was now an archway that appeared to be grown rather than constructed. Organic curves and materials that shifted color based on the lighting created an entrance that looked more like a portal to another dimension than residential housing. "Jake!" Zara's voice called from inside. Perfect timing. He stepped through the archway and stopped dead. His apartment had been transformed into something that defied architectural classification. The walls curved in impossible angles, covered with bioluminescent vines that pulsed in complex rhythms. The ceiling had somehow been raised, or removed entirely, revealing a view of stars that shouldn't have been visible from this level of the station. In the center of this transformed space, Zara and Kira worked together with the focused intensity of engineers solving a critical problem. They'd set up what appeared to be a sophisticated laboratory, complete with holographic displays showing complex biological diagrams and chemical formulas that hurt Jake's eyes to look at directly. "What?" Jake said carefully. "Is all this?" "Solution optimization," Kira replied without looking up from a device that was definitely not standard station equipment. "We discovered a significant problem with our original competitive approach." "What problem?" Zara gestured to one of the holographic displays, which showed what appeared to be two overlapping biological cycles. "Our reproductive timelines are more synchronized than we initially calculated. If we continue territorial competition, both of us will reach critical biological failure points." "Critical failure points?" "Death," Kira said bluntly. "Mine in 6 days, hers in 4. Competing for you was inefficient resource allocation." Jake stared at the display, his engineer's mind trying to process the implications. "So you decided to, what, work together?" "Collaborative problem solving," Zara confirmed. "We researched human relationship structures and discovered several models that could accommodate multiple partners." "Multiple partners?" "Polyamorous bonding arrangements," Kira said, finally looking up from her work. "Your species has extensive documentation of successful multi-individual romantic structures." Jake felt his worldview performing another fundamental shift. "You want to share me?" "We want to create a sustainable relationship model that meets everyone's biological and emotional requirements," Zara corrected. Standard competition was leading to suboptimal outcomes for all participants. "Plus," Kira added with what might have been humor, "we discovered we're actually quite compatible ourselves." Jake looked between them, noticing for the first time that they were working together with the seamless coordination of long-term partners. "Compatible how?" Jake asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer would rearrange his understanding of relationships even further. "Vexarian and Zarathi species evolved complementary traits," Zara explained, activating another holographic display. "Our biochemistries create synergistic effects when combined: enhanced pheromone production, improved emotional regulation, optimized reproductive success rates." "Optimized reproductive," Jake stopped. "Are you saying you're attracted to each other?" "Among other things," Kira replied with a predatory smile that now seemed directed at both Jake and Zara. "Turns out territorial competition was masking significant biochemical compatibility indicators." "When did you figure this out?" "About 3 hours ago," Zara said. After we stopped trying to eliminate each other and started actually communicating about our respective needs and capabilities. Jake surveyed the transformed apartment again. The living walls pulsed gently, and he realized the patterns corresponded to both women's emotional states, a biological display of their synchronized feelings. So, what exactly are you proposing? Tripartite bonding arrangement, Kira said, moving to stand beside Zara. Each participant maintains individual identity while contributing to collective relationship stability. In layman's terms, the three of us, together, Zara said simply, if you're willing. Jake felt his brain attempting to process this development. Yesterday, he'd been a single systems engineer with a gambling debt. Today he was being invited into an alien polyamorous relationship that apparently required biotechnology to function properly. This is insane, he said weakly. Most optimal solutions appear insane until they work, Kira observed. But what about your biological cycles? The time pressure? Solved through collaborative bonding, Zara replied. Physical and emotional intimacy with both of you would provide sufficient biological stimulus to reset our reproductive systems safely. Both of us? Well, yes, Zara said, looking slightly confused. Did you think we'd exclude Kira from physical bonding? That would be highly inefficient. Jake's brain finally caught up with what they were actually suggesting. You mean all three of us, together, intimately? Eventually, Kira said with characteristic directness, after proper courtship development and consent verification from all participants. We're not rushing into anything, Zara assured him. We learned from our previous tactical errors. Jake moved to what had once been his couch, but was now some kind of biomechanical seating that adjusted to his body as he sat down. The two women watched him with expressions that mixed hope, determination, and barely contained anxiety. Okay, he said finally. I need to understand something. Is this what you both actually want, or is this what your biology is forcing you to want? The question hung in the air between them. Through the living walls, Jake could see emotional patterns shifting, uncertainty from Zara, calculation from Kira, and something that might have been vulnerability from both. That's a complex question, Zara admitted. Complex how? Our biology and our emotions aren't separate systems, Kira explained. Vexarians and Zerathi evolved integrated psychological-physiological responses. What we want and what we need are the same thing. But, Zara added quickly, that doesn't make our feelings artificial. It makes them honest. Honest? We can't lie to ourselves about attraction or compatibility, Zara said. Our bodies won't let us. If I didn't genuinely care about you, both of you, my biochemistry would reject the bonding process entirely. Same for me, Kira confirmed. Vexarian biology punishes false emotional bonds. I couldn't fake attraction even if I wanted to. Jake looked between them. These two extraordinary beings who'd turned his life upside down and were now offering him something he'd never considered, but found himself genuinely tempted by. What would this actually look like, he asked. Day to day, I mean. Shared living space, Kira said, gesturing around the transformed apartment. Collaborative decision-making, mutual support and protection. Enhanced emotional intimacy through biochemical bonding, Zara added. Shared experiences that would be impossible with single-partner arrangements. And physically, whatever feels natural and consensual for all participants, Zara said. No pressure, no obligations beyond what we all choose together. Jake stood up, pacing the space between them. The living walls responded to his movement, patterns flowing in his wake like a visual representation of his emotional turbulence. This is crazy, he said. I barely know either of you. 3 days ago, I was worried about paying rent and avoiding debt collectors. Now you're asking me to commit to some kind of alien relationship experiment that could literally determine whether you live or die. Yes, both women said simultaneously. And you think this could actually work? We think it's worth trying, Zara said softly. The alternative is losing each other and potentially losing you. Plus, Kira added with a slight smile, the preliminary biochemical data suggests we're highly compatible as a triad, much more than any pairing combination. You tested our compatibility? While you were sleeping, Zara said. Passive pheromone analysis, genetic marker assessment, psychological profile correlation. You analyzed my psychology while I was unconscious. Your scent carries a lot of information, Kira explained. Stress responses, emotional patterns, attraction indicators, very revealing data. And we're compatible in ways that shouldn't be statistically possible, Zara said, her excitement evident. Jake, what we could have together, all three of us, it's unprecedented. Jake stopped pacing, looking at both women who were watching him with barely controlled hope. The apartment around them pulsed with living light, a physical manifestation of the emotional connection they'd already begun building. Okay, he said quietly. I have one question, and I need completely honest answers. Of course, Zara said. Always, Kira added. If I say yes to this, if we try this crazy experiment, and it doesn't work out, what happens to you? The women exchanged glances. We've considered that possibility, Zara said carefully. And medical intervention exists, Kira said. Hormonal suppression, artificial reproductive cycle reset, surgical options. But they're not guaranteed to work, Zara admitted, and the side effects can be significant. How significant? Permanent emotional dampening, Kira said bluntly. Loss of reproductive capability, possible neurological damage. You'd risk that. We'd risk it for the chance of something real, Zara said. Something none of us could have alone. Jake looked around the transformed apartment one more time, at the impossible architecture, the living walls, the view of stars that shouldn't exist. These two women had literally reshaped reality to create space for the three of them together. All right, he said, feeling like he was stepping off a cliff into free fall. Let's try it. The change in both women was immediate and electric. The walls around them flared with brilliant bioluminescence, and Jake felt something shift in the air itself, like pressure equalizing after a long climb. Really? Zara breathed. You're sure? Kira added. I'm terrified, Jake said honestly. But I'm also more intrigued by this than I've been by anything in years. If you're both willing to risk everything for this, then I guess I can risk trying. What followed was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. Not the immediate physical intimacy he'd half expected, but something more complex and gradual. They spent the rest of the day simply talking, real conversation about hopes, fears, dreams, and the thousand small details that make up a life. Zara told them about her homeworld, a place of impossible beauty where emotion and environment were linked in ways that made the living walls of their apartment seem mundane. She'd left not just for reproductive freedom, but for the chance to experience love without biological imperatives determining every aspect of the relationship. Kira shared stories of Vexar, a world where strength was valued above all else, but where she'd always felt like an outsider for preferring strategy to brute force. Her warrior's training had taught her to protect what mattered, and she'd decided that what mattered was the chance for genuine connection. Jake found himself opening up about his own life, the loneliness of drifting between worlds, the safety of keeping people at arm's length, the growing realization that safety might be overrated. As the station's artificial evening cycle began, they ordered food from a dozen different vendors, creating a feast that represented all three of their cultures. They ate sitting on the floor around a low table that had somehow grown from the living architecture, sharing dishes and stories and laughter that felt natural despite its impossibility. "So what happens now?" Jake asked as they cleared away the remains of their impromptu banquet. "Now we start figuring out how to be us," Zara said. "All three of us, together." "Trial and error," Kira added, "with excellent error recovery protocols." "Speaking of which," Zara said, moving closer to Jake, "there is one thing we should address tonight." "What's that?" "The biological deadline. My cycle peaks tomorrow. Kira's in 3 days. We need to at least begin the bonding process or risk cascade failure." Jake's heart rate spiked. "Begin how?" "Physical contact," Kira explained, settling beside him. "Nothing overwhelming, just enough skin contact to initiate biochemical synchronization." "And then?" "Then we see what feels right," Zara said, her hand finding his. "For all of us." Jake looked down at their joined hands, his human skin against Zara's luminous green, and felt something click into place. Through her touch, he could sense her emotions, hope, affection, and a desire that went far deeper than mere biological necessity. When Kira took his other hand, the effect intensified. Her silver skin was warm against his, and through the contact he felt her fierce protectiveness, her growing affection, and her amazement at finding connection with beings so different from herself. "This is really happening," he said wonderfully. "This is really happening," Zara confirmed, her thumb tracing patterns on his knuckles. "Are you ready for it to be happening?" Kira asked. Jake looked between them, these two extraordinary women who'd crashed into his life and offered him something he'd never dared to imagine. The practical part of his mind listed all the reasons this was insane, impossible, and destined for disaster. The rest of him was already reaching for them both. "Yeah," he said, pulling them closer. "I'm ready." What followed was gentle, gradual, and unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. No desperate urgency or biological imperative, just 3 people discovering what it meant to touch and be touched by someone who understood them completely. The living walls around them pulsed with soft light, responding to their shared emotions. The impossible architecture seemed to breathe with them, creating a space that existed just for the 3 of them and the connection they were building. When they finally fell asleep together, tangled in sheets that had somehow appeared from the apartment's organic systems, Jake felt a contentment he'd never known was possible. Outside their transformed home, Nexus Station continued its rotation through the void, carrying them all toward whatever future they would build together. But inside, 3 beings from different worlds had found a way to create something entirely new, proof that the universe's greatest discoveries often came from the willingness to try solutions that seemed impossible until they worked. Love, as it turned out, was the ultimate engineering challenge, and sometimes the best way to solve a complex problem was to add more variables, not fewer. Epilogue. 6 months later. The promotion ceremony for Nexus Station's first interspecies relations coordinator took place in the main observation lounge, with representatives from 17 different worlds in attendance. Jake stood at the podium, wearing a formal uniform that had been specially designed to accommodate the subtle bioluminescent patterns that now traced his skin, permanent markers of his bonding with Zara and Kira. The patterns pulsed gently as he spoke, responding to his emotional state in ways that had become as natural as breathing. 6 months ago, he said, looking out at the diverse crowd, I was a systems engineer with a gambling problem and a talent for avoiding complicated situations. Today, I'm apparently qualified to help other beings navigate the most complicated situation of all, love. Laughter rippled through the audience. In the front row, Zara and Kira sat side by side, both wearing expressions of pride that would have seemed impossible when they'd first met as territorial rivals. The interspecies relations program started as a solution to a personal crisis, Jake continued, but it's become something much larger, proof that connection doesn't require similarity, that love doesn't need to follow predetermined patterns, and that the best families are often the ones we choose for ourselves. He gestured to the data display behind him, showing statistics that would have seemed fictional 6 months earlier. Since the program launched, we've successfully mediated 47 interspecies relationship conflicts, established compatibility protocols for 12 different biological systems, and helped create the first permanent multi-species residential sector in station history. Applause filled the lounge. Jake caught sight of Chief Martinez in the crowd, wearing an expression that suggested she still couldn't quite believe how the situation had resolved itself. But the real success, Jake said, isn't in the numbers. It's in the proof that love really is the ultimate engineering challenge, and that the best solutions are often the ones nobody thought to try. After the ceremony, Jake found himself on the observation deck with Zara and Kira, watching ships arrive and depart from the station that had become their home in ways none of them had expected. "Any regrets?" Zara asked, settling against his side with the fluid grace that still made his heart skip. "Only that it took a gambling debt and alien territorial disputes to figure out what I actually wanted," Jake replied. "Sometimes the universe has to be dramatic to get our attention," Kira observed, her arm draped around both of them with protective casualness. Through their shared bond, deeper now after months of practice, Jake felt their contentment mixing with his own. The apartment they'd created together had become the prototype for multi-species residential design. Their relationship had become the model for compatibility protocols that were being studied across the galaxy. "So, what's next?" he asked. "The diplomatic corps wants us to establish a satellite program on Terra Station," Zara said. "Apparently, Earth humans are having their own interspecies relationship challenges." "Road trip to Earth?" Jake grinned. "My family is going to love this." "You still haven't told them about us," Kira pointed out. "I've been working up to it." "Hey, Mom, I'm in a committed relationship with 2 aliens who can literally smell my emotions," is a conversation that requires careful preparation. "We could demonstrate," Zara suggested with mock innocence. "Show them how happy you are." "The bioluminescent displays might be a bit much for suburban Ohio," Jake said dryly. "We'll tone it down," Kira promised. "Diplomatic protocol." Jake pulled them both closer, feeling the familiar wonder at how perfectly they fit together, not just physically, but emotionally, intellectually, and in ways he was still discovering. "You know what the best part is?" he said. "What?" both women asked. "We're writing the manual as we go. No predetermined patterns, no ancient traditions we have to follow. Just us figuring out how to be extraordinary together." The station rotated slowly beneath them, carrying thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds, all searching for their own forms of connection and belonging. In the distance, Earth's sun was a barely visible point of light, representing home and family and the life Jake had left behind. But here, in this impossible space he'd helped create with 2 remarkable women who'd literally rearranged reality to make room for love, Jake knew he'd found something better than home. He'd found a future worth engineering. "I love you both," he said quietly, "in case I haven't mentioned that recently." "You mention it constantly," Zara replied with a smile. "Your bioluminescent patterns give you away." "Vexarians appreciate direct communication," Kira added, "but the patterns are nice too." Through the observation deck's transparent walls, Jake watched a new ship dock, another arrival, another being starting fresh in a place where anything was possible. 6 months ago, that had been him. Now, he was living proof that sometimes the universe's wildest experiments turned out to be its greatest successes, And sometimes the best way to solve an impossible problem was to find the right people to be impossible with. The bioluminescent patterns on his skin pulsed gently, carrying his contentment through the bond to the two women who changed everything by refusing to accept that love had to follow anybody else's rules. In the end, they'd written their own, and it was a beautiful story.